This is Beering Ain't Easy. Do you spend all week thinking about what new beer you'll try next? Then yeah, this podcast is for you. Come join us while we try new beers, share our ratings, debate craft beer culture, and in the process, throw a few jabs at ourselves. So crack one if you got one, and turn it up.
Welcome to Beering Ain't Easy, episode 15 with Drew and Adam.
Our podcast is now old enough to have its own quinceañera.
You know, I reversed the order of when I say the episode number and when I say our first names because I was trying to screw up your rhythm. Yeah. On your response.
Little do you know, I don't have anything to screw up to start with. So, all right. Last week, the Arkansas episode, we had some bourbon barrel stouts. Tell me what your parting thoughts are.
I felt like I ran a marathon last week during that episode.
Absolutely, man. That was brutal on the body.
That was a lot of fun, though. You know, I've never, prior to this podcast, I've never drank beers, side by side and analyzed the differences between them. And if you're listening to this podcast, I strongly urge you to do so because it is a lot of fucking fun.
Hell yeah, it is.
As I reflect on the episode, those were some really, really good beers. All those beers were really good.
Yeah, I thought so too.
But it was really fun for me making fun of Drew in Arkansas's bizarre alcohol rules.
The state of Arkansas brought it last week with downloads for our podcast. And so I don't think you can bag on Arkansas until you come with your Iowa episode and exceed the Arkansas bar that we have set on number of downloads per episode. Because, they brought it.
They did.
They brought it with their stouts, and they brought it with their downloads.
Arkansas did come through with the downloads. Our last episode was our most downloaded episode yet in the first week.
And you talked about that episode being a marathon. What's funny is when we first started this podcast, you and I got behind that mic, and we were awkward as hell, and we were like, dude, we need as much alcohol as possible to make a good podcast. But over time, we've realized, maybe drinking a ton of beer makes for bad podcasts.
Yeah.
And so that episode, we were drinking all 10 to 14% alcohol beers. And I shit you not, I edited out 15 minutes of us sounding like drunken fools.
We have a producer's cut that we'll be releasing of all the stuff that he edited out.
All the good stuff. Only other takeaway I have from that episode is we had one comment from someone from Arkansas that listened, and they said that they fact checked my Sunday rule, and which is all right. Hey, we don't get everything right.
Bring it on.
So I said you couldn't get any packaged alcohol in Arkansas on Sunday, but he corrected me and said if you go to a brewery or a distillery, you can buy alcohol. Or an army base, but who fuck goes to an army base? But you can get alcohol on Sunday.
To go to the army base, do you have to be in the army?
I think you do. My granddad used to always take me to the army base, but he was in the military, so. Anyway. But, I got to counter that fact with another fact that we didn't cover last week. So my dad.
What is it?
So my dad sent me a text, and he was like, I looked it up, and in the entire country, there are 83 counties that are dry counties, and 34 of those are from Arkansas. So Arkansas is the number one state in the nation for dry counties.
That just makes me wonder so many questions, not only about Arkansas, but what's the next leading state?
It's the South. I don't know what the hell they were thinking.
What is also interesting is why does Arkansas have this rule that you can't buy packaged alcohol or alcohol in general anywhere on Sunday except for at a brewery or a distillery? It makes me, what were lawmakers thinking?
I think they were trying to protect local business. It's like if you're an Arkansas brewer or you're an Arkansas liquor producer, we're going to give you all the business on Sunday. That's the only thing I can come up with.
I guess it's not a bad business model. All right, so Drew, what are we talking about today?
Today, we've got an episode that's called Keeping It Professional.
I don't know that I can participate in this episode.
So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk a little bit about the topic of professional life and balancing it with our drinking habits.
This is going to be a very interesting episode.
So one thing I'm just going to say right off the bat is when it comes to my work personality and my at-home personality, they could be not further away from each other. I'm professional mode, and then I get home and I crack that first beer and it's gone.
See, I used to be like that at the start of my career where I was all business, would never joke around. And if people saw me outside of work, who worked with me 10 years ago, they wouldn't even recognize who I was. But then over the last 10 years, I've morphed into almost the same person. I'm much more professional, but I joke around and I laugh at work in a professional manner.
I feel like I can still cut it up at work. I still joke around, but I swear to God, even if it's doing a happy hour after work, it's like this giant weight has been pulled off my shoulders when I get out there and I crack that first beer and I'm like, hey, let's go. I become an extrovert.
I think that is alcoholism that you're describing.
Yeah. I go from introvert to extrovert in one beer. So before we get too far into the professional mode, I think it's time to crack open our beer for tonight.
All right, I'll crack it. You tell them what we're drinking.
Heck yeah. So I'm super excited tonight. This is something that we've been waiting to do for a while on the podcast. We are drinking a Black is Beautiful beer. This one in particular is made by Parish Brewing Company, which happens to be one of my favorite breweries of all time in Broussard, Louisiana.
I have mixed emotions about Parish Brewing. So I think we've talked about my opposition to hyped breweries in the past.
They're legit.
They are a really good brewery. They make really good beers and also not perfect beers. And I rate them based on the performance of that beer.
Not the brewery.
Not the brewery. So back to the beer, Drew.
So back to Black is Beautiful. So what's so cool about this, I think this is probably the most awesome beer-related thing that happened this year is one of the breweries in San Antonio, Texas, Weathered Souls Brewing Company. They created this beer, which is a Imperial double stout base recipe. And they took the recipe and they put it online. They put a challenge out there for anybody that sold these beers. They donated all their proceeds to a nonprofit that either fights against racial injustice or supports racial equality. They've got 1,000 breweries that are making the same beer. And even if you're a home brewer, you can go online and you can search Black is Beautiful. You can find the same recipe. So this one in particular from Parish in Louisiana, they added some sugary goodness to their recipe and made it an Imperial double pastry stout. The foundation they chose was actually the MJF Foundation. It's like a scholarship that was set up by Brooklyn Brewery, and they're bringing diversity into the brewing space. So I thought it was about time for us to bring it on the podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is a miracle that this beer has made it in my fridge for about a month. I think you need to tell the audience the story of how you acquired this beer.
I feel like every beer we have to tell a story on it.
Well, any beer that you get by a means other than just going to that direct brewery or liquor store or bottle shop, any beer you get from a person is story worthy. I think I just made an official podcast rule.
Every beer has a story.
I was waiting for you to quit talking so I could do my stupid song.
I was anticipating some stupid song, and so I kept trying to talk fast. I was like, please don't put the audience through this.
Accents and songs. That's my bailiwick.
All right. Tell them the friggin' story.
As we've mentioned on many occasions, we're involved in lots of Facebook groups, our favorite being the Houston Craft Beer Society. And there is a legendary member of the Houston Craft Beer Society that actually takes trips to these breweries and gets everybody to buy their beer. He picks it up for them like on freaking pallets and pallets full of beer, and he brings them back. His name's Jimmy.
He is a friggin' legend. Like, it's funny because I feel like I know him just from like watching his like BS joking around posts. I see him making a fucking mockery of the world.
I mean, my story hasn't really gotten good. The best part of the story is when I went to go pick up my beer, we were like a line of us outside of the back of his car. He had the trunk open, and I was like, wow, this guy's legit. He's got like a trunk full of beer. And he rolls up wearing a Pornhub shirt, and he took a dildo and he stuck it to the side of his car, and that's the legend of Jimmy.
Yes, that's it. People listening are like, what in the fuck are these guys talking about?
So that's how I got my beer today.
So do you normally go meet up with people at random places with dildos on the side of their car to get beer?
It's the only way to get beer. I mean, you left me hanging on that. You were supposed to be procurement, and what happened is I have to get it from like the dildo car.
Whatever it takes to get a highly sought after beer.
Hell yeah, I got that new release.
Yeah, we never would have been able to get it by any other means.
So I think we need to get back on track. I think we need to get back to being professionals. I think like the first thing we got to talk about is, in this COVID world, we've had to do a little balance of work in the office and work from home. What's been your experience there? What stands out to you working from home?
There's a lot of things that stand out working from home. And they're all like WebEx, Teams call related, I feel like.
Hold up, for the listeners that aren't in a corporate setting, WebEx and Teams are like the same thing as Zoom. They're just video calls.
There's certain people that I work with that, like, for the life of them, they will never fucking learn the etiquette or how to effectively manage themselves on a WebEx. It's like, there's the guy that, like, is talking on mute the whole time. Like, you can tell, like, you'll call on him and he'll, it's silent and it's like, hey, Bob, you're on mute.
Every
it's
fucking
like
time.
Yeah, it's like like you're on enough calls, it's like, hey buddy, you need to take yourself off mute. And then like there's a guy who like smashes his freaking keyboard while he's off mute, and it's like, hey Bob, you need to mute yourself. No one else can hear anything. They hear you smashing your keyboard.
It's like that cat video where the cat's hitting the keyboard like really hard.
Then there's like the people, myself is probably one of the main examples, like where there's always kids like screaming in the background.
I feel like the other thing with WebEx is like, if you take another call and you don't mute yourself, it makes that fucking annoying like beeping, like beep beep. And so someone's like, okay, who's on hold right now? And they're like trying to figure out on this call of like 50 people on it, like how to mute that one person.
Yeah, so I have a good personal story for the audience today. So every Monday afternoon I have like my staff meeting, and so like I'm the primary talker during that meeting. And so like,
big surprise.
Yeah. And so, my wife is just going through hell. This is like right in the heat of COVID where, she has a kindergartner, a second grader trying to do like the virtual school, and then the 18-month-old in the background creating chaos. And so one day she's just like outside of my office, like losing her shit on the kids. Like, Caleb, stop talking, stop bothering your sister. It's like I can handle like when the kids are like screaming in the background, but like when my wife is yelling at the kids in the background.
I hope she dropped like a couple cuss words.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, that must have been the neighbors.
I don't have any like super good work from home stories, but like I've got I want to offer a story up and challenge you on this is like most embarrassing work story that you've had in your career. And so while you're thinking about it,
okay, I gotta think.
I'm going to hit you with mine. And so mine's not alcohol related, but it's coffee related. So like I was early on in my career, I went to like the headquarters of the business I was going to. They were set up in Indianapolis. I'd never been there before. And so in my mind, I'm thinking I'm going to schmooze with these higher ups in the company at the headquarters. And so I had on my nice shirt and everything. And I went up and I'm like, man, I could really use some coffee. So I went over to the little coffee station. I poured myself some coffee. I was trying to put the top on it. It was one of those like plastic cups. And like, I don't know what happened, but like all the muscles in one of my hands must have just relaxed. And that fucking coffee cup hit the fucking like, desk. And it just splashed. I just watched it in slow motion like the Matrix. I was trying to dodge it, but coffee hit all over my shirt, all over my pants. And I just was like looking with coffee like all around me. I was like, oh my God, what the fuck just happened? I was like 15 minutes from having a meeting with someone like 3 levels up from me. And so I'm like trying to scrub the floor. And then I'm like, oh God, I had to have someone let me in the building because I didn't have access. And so I was like, well, what the hell do I do? So I like walked out and they had the secretary at the front. And I was like, is there any way you could let me out of here? And I was like, I had a coffee mishap. And like, I mean, I could not go into a meeting. I was like covered in fucking coffee. And so she took me out there, thankfully. And luckily, because I had been staying in a hotel, I had my bag in the car and I had a shirt that I'd already worn once, but I pulled that shit out. I put it up, buttoned it up, tried to like straighten it out. And I went back up there and made it through the meeting. But I was like, for a moment there, I was like, oh my God, I could just see my career just dissolving in front of my eyes.
All right. That's a good one. I can't really think of my most embarrassing work story, but there are 2 funny, embarrassing stories for other people. That
I would expect nothing less from you to throw the shade on someone else.
Yes, I will put myself above that, and I will bring down someone else. So, a company I worked for in the past, we had just acquired a division of another company, and so we had like a conference with a couple of folks from the new company. And then it was like mainly employees of the prior company. So like it was really just like the big wigs of the company that we had acquired were at this conference. And so it was like a safety conference. And so it was something we did like every year. And they'd just send like a variety of employees like from all levels. And so there was this frontline worker who went there, and like he's not used to like traveling and all of that. And so we have this open bar like right when we get there. I mean, it's like a 2-3 hour open bar, and this guy just gets fucking smoked. and so then
that happens.
Oh yeah. So I see this guy who works for this like vice president for the company that we acquired. I see this frontline worker talking to this guy, and I'm like, oh God, because the guy worked for me. Yeah. so I look over and he has his like arm around him and he's like, we fucking own you now. And I'm just like, oh my God.
God help me.
Did that just happen?
I feel like the holiday parties are just like that too.
Yeah.
They're the worst.
It was like,
when you're telling that story, that made me think of a crazy it wasn't a holiday party, but it was a crazy work party. So this again was a company that I worked for prior to the one I'm working in, because I like my job a lot and I don't want to lose it. But in this company, they had like a new employee orientation, and you went up out of town and you did the whole thing where you heard speakers, you learned about the company, you did visits, everything you would expect. But the very last night, again, open bar. So anybody who's got a small business, open bar isn't the greatest idea in the world. So it was at a Dave & Buster's. And like, I wasn't married at the time, but me and Meredith were engaged, I think, and we were having an intense conversation on the phone that I got pulled away from the party for a while and was having to deal with this conversation. I came back into the group and I had missed like an hour of the party. And so I was stone cold sober because I was trying to argue my point on the phone. And I came out and I saw these like flights of shots, and they were drinking Irish car bombs and they were taking tequila shots. And I walked up and I was like, oh,
that is a recipe for a fun night.
Oh my God. And so the party started wrapping up and I was like, oh, this is looking a little sketchy. And so we got onto the bus to go back to the hotel. And I shit you not, it was like any frat party or any sorority party you could imagine. Like, people were going fucking nuts in that bus. 2 different people puked in front of me in a corporate environment. And like, I don't know if that was the future manager in me, but I was just looking around at people and I was like, yeah, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. You're fucking not going to make it. but like, I realized I was sitting next to this guy who was from one of our sites in Scotland, which Scottish is like my favorite accent. So obviously I wanted to sit next to the guy, but he was wasted from Irish car bombs. And he like put his arm around me and he's like, yeah, Drew, you're a real gentleman. I was like, oh my God, that was an epic night. And it's probably better that I had that fight that night.
All right. So I got to give my grand finale story of the corporate world.
Hell yeah.
So we were doing a business unit global town hall WebEx.
That sounds important.
Not only important, but big. I mean, there's probably at least 1,000 people on this call.
Dang.
So I'm in the conference room with my staff, and we're projecting it up on the TV in the conference room. So we're getting ready. And then I look over at the supervisor who works for me, and he just busts out laughing. I'm like, what is he doing? And I look up at the TV, and there's this guy in his fucking underwear on his camera.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, it must have been like a sales guy or something. So this guy's fucking no shirt, whitey tighties. He's clearly in a hotel room, but it's like 2:00 in the afternoon. I'm like, what is this fucking guy doing in his whitey tighties at 2:00 in the afternoon? But I mean, he's like the first person on the WebEx. And so it's like, everyone sees it. Everyone sitting on this call.
You cannot unsee that.
That's the caller.
Oh my God. This totally reminds me of the guy in the news, Jeffrey Toobin, the news analyst who pulled his stuff out. He got caught on a WebEx and got fired.
I think it may be the same guy.
He just moved companies. Yeah. Oh man, that's ridiculous. All right. I feel like we need to start talking about this beer.
I think everyone is getting sick of listening to our bullshit.
Let's bring on those ratings.
All right, Drew, what are you thinking about this beer? Well, hold on. So just a recap. So the beer that we're drinking is Black is Beautiful, salted caramel, Imperial Stout by Drew's all-time favorite brewery, Parish Brewing Company.
I do love me some Parish.
I know you do, and your rating will probably reflect that. So what are you thinking about the beer?
When I taste it, I definitely get that sugar and I definitely get that salt. I mean, it's liquid salted caramel. I mean, that's a pretty good descriptor of what I'm tasting. What about you?
Well, on the smell, I get a unique smell. I get like a dark chocolate plum, kind of a strong plum smell.
I don't know if I get the plum, but I'm feeling you. I'm feeling you.
The taste, I don't get a lot of caramel. I get like the salted sweetness, but like not a lot of the caramel.
It's a thick, syrupy stout. And so after last week in stout mode where we were bourbon barrel stouts, this is definitely a lot sweeter and definitely like it feels a lot thicker and a lot more like candy. I mean, this is an Imperial pastry stout, and I love me some candy. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I love me some chocolate candy, so I love Imperial Pastry sugary stouts.
What are you going with? What is your rating?
I am going with a 4.0 on this Imperial Stout. What about you?
I'm going with a 3.75.
Okay.
It was good. Wasn't great.
Yeah, it didn't stack up to those bourbon barrel stouts last week, huh?
No, it wasn't. And for me, a non-bourbon barrel-aged stout is always going to struggle to compete with a bourbon barrel-aged stout.
I can respect that. But if you're someone that loves sweetness and loves like thick syrupy beers, this is your beer.
This one was a little too syrupy for me.
Tell me about it.
Okay, so I wasn't going to say it, but I got to let the audience know what went down when I was drinking this beer.
It subtracted 0.25 off his rating.
At least. So I'm taking a drink, and all of a sudden, I get like this jelly textured, like, I don't even know how to describe it, but like this chunk of chocolate slime in my beer. And like I grab in my mouth, I'm like, what is going on in my mouth right now?
And I'm actually trying to record the podcast.
And he's recording, and I'm like pulling this like black slime out of my fucking mouth.
For the record, I did not get the black slime in my can.
And so it was really hard for me to be objective after that went down. If the audience is wondering, I did finish my beer because I'm a freaking man.
It's expected out of you.
But there was a little too much coagulation going on for me.
What's funny is like last week we drank those bourbon barrel stouts, and my dad drank the KBS while he was listening to our episode last week, and he checked it on his app for calories, and he had a mini freak out moment because he's like, oh my God, KBS is 360 calories. Well, let me tell you what, this pastry stout is at least over 400 calories. I mean, guaranteed.
Well, that son of a bitch is only a 12 ouncer. This is a pint.
Yeah, fuck, this is 500.
This is probably 500.
Yeah, so if you see us looking a little bloated next week, you know what happened.
Now you know what it's like keeping it professional.
Hell yeah.
See y'all next time.
This has been a Beering Ain't Easy production at the Sesh Co-working Podcast Studio in Houston, Texas. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you want to see what we're drinking, our untapped handles are Beering Ain't Easy Adam and Beering Ain't Easy Drew.